Hi everyone, my name is Chris and I'm making a video game. It doesn't have a proper name yet, but I can't keep calling it my project, so I've given it a temporary code name. Welcome to episode 3 of my dev diary for Project Husky. In this sprint I created a testing region and added some player interaction. Let's start with the testing region. The test region is a special area that is outside the game world and will not be part of the final game, but allows me to test new ideas without breaking anything else. To access this area, I created a simple teleportation script and configured it so I can fire up the game, step into the teleporter, and instantly be in the testing area without having to travel a long distance or mess with the player's spawning script. In the last episode of this dev diary, to create the demonstration of the drag effect, I had to create a lot of new game objects and mangle the game world quite a bit, then record the footage and then undo everything I'd done once I was finished. This seemed like a lot of wasted effort, so this time around I'm doing it smarter. The test region will be a permanent part of the world, tucked away in a corner, where I can easily tinker with new ideas and test specific scenarios without having to worry about wrecking the game world. Next up, I built a system for hiding the roof layer of objects when the player moves beneath them. For example, the canopies of trees and roofs of buildings. Without this system, it would be difficult for the player to navigate through the forest region of the game, as well as making exploring the inside of buildings impossible. Having this system opens up the possibility of hiding things where the player cannot normally see them, for example, inside a building with a locked door. One of the regions of the game world is a forest, with large trees that partially obscure old ruins and other points of interest. The system will make navigating these areas much easier, but still enough of a challenge that the player feels rewarded for exploration. I came up with two different approaches and decided that both had their uses. In the first version, the player hits the trigger region and causes the model to fade out over about half a second. This works well for interior spaces, such as buildings, but looks a little bit weird when I applied it to trees. I came up with the idea of the fade out occurring over distance, not time, so as the player approaches or moves away from the object, it fades in or out. I tested it and decided it looked a lot nicer for the cluster of trees I created as a test, so I'll use that in the forest region. Next, I implemented doors. I started with a simple case. The player moves towards the trigger region, which activates an animation that opens the door. I got that working in about 15 minutes. Next up, removing the automatic trigger and instead prompting the user that they can open the door when they get close enough. This ended up taking longer than I expected. To start with, the trigger region was tied to the door object, so as soon as it moved to the side, the trigger region was embedded in the wall, so you couldn't re-trigger it to close the door without moving away from the opening, which is just stupid. I ended up changing the door mesh to be a child of an empty object that just contains the trigger. The animation moves the door mesh only, so the trigger stays put. Awesome. Doors seem like a pretty basic feature, but it was very satisfying to see them working reliably. I also decided to see what happens if you try to close the door when the player is in the way. I thought maybe some crazy physics glitch might rocket the player across the map, but disappointingly the player just slides out of the way. Finally, I added some stub code for triggering conversations with NPCs. Meet Alan and Jerry, our stand-in NPCs. They don't have much to say yet, but will hopefully be more talkative in future sprints. As I mentioned earlier, this sprint I used animation components for the first time. It didn't work very well to start with, as the animation got stuck as the default state and kept looping endlessly. I also ran into a small issue when trying to implement a door that swings open. Maybe I can repurpose this as a diabolical trap in a later part of the game. That's it for this fortnight. In the next sprint, I will be continuing working on player interaction, in particular the dialogue system, and start creating some basic enemy AI. See you next time.